and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a good week. So some things to talk about this week. For the first one, I'm going to take us just slightly outside of Microsoft 365 developer extensibility and just touch on something that's happening in the Windows world that I think is worth keeping an eye on. And that's a blog post in the week about how Microsoft essentially are bringing AI to Windows and what that means. So I'm not going to go through this whole blog post. You may have heard this kind of covered in the tech news if you follow the tech news. There's a few things that I think are of interest to developers. It's worth keeping an eye, obviously, on what they're doing. I know typically, it's silly to say like Windows isn't an extension point for developers because, of course, there's applications, so it really is. But it's different it's not like in the same way that Microsoft 365 has extensibility areas. But that is changing. With these things like click to do, where you'll be able to register your own click to do things here, and maybe actions as well. Copilot actions is worth keeping an eye on, I suppose. Where Copilot agents can perform tasks for users. I think that's going to be based around the operating system first, but you could totally see how that might spread out and be something that developers can get involved in. So this is, like I say, it's a different model to the Microsoft 365 extensibility one. I do think, though, it could end up competing with it slightly, a little bit. And that's going to be interesting to see how that works. Does it make more sense for users to do their stuff in Microsoft 365 or just straight in Windows? And I think we're just going to see how that plays out and how it goes. This blog post feels like a sort of scene setting for Ignite, which is happening next month. There might be announcements, therefore, about all of this stuff. So I'd say, Ignite is an IT Pro conference. They like to cover Windows things as much as Azure and Microsoft 365 and everything else. So I think it's probably worth looking out for something like that and just seeing how it impacts us as developers and if there's places where we can get more involved in the extensibility story. So that's cool. Okay, we have talked in the past about Microsoft Agent Framework when it came out, which is the new open source engine. It's kind of it's a combination or collection, if you like, of Semantic Kernel, AutoGen, and the process framework. Like I say, it's open source. And there's a really good write-up actually by Jamie Maguire, fellow MVP, who was doing AI stuff before it was cool, back when it was cognitive services, doing some really cool stuff there. And he's got a really good blog post, which I'm just going to quickly kind of go through, but you should absolutely read, because he kind of really goes into detail about what this thing is and what it's replacing and why. And one of the big takeaways that I think was worth calling out is, there's too much choice at the moment and it's too confusing for developers. So I think this, which kind of bundles together a bunch of things, and also over time, I think will replace them. And I didn't get that initially when I first talked about Agent Framework. Officially the Semantic Kernel's not going anywhere, but it is the kind of successor. Like Agent Framework is the successor to Semantic Kernel, so I would say it is maybe time to think about moving over. Consider, if you're using Semantic Kernel today, consider that migration path over, because it's probably going to go away at some point. And Jamie reckons the same here. He thinks probably 6 to 12 months for getting off Semantic Kernel. So I think it's cool. It's worth reading through, because if you saw the announcement about Agent Framework go past and then you're still not quite sure whether you should be using it or not, I think you should, especially if you would naturally reach for something like Semantic Kernel, then this is definitely kind of the best alternative to use instead, I think, for now, and just keep an eye on it as it evolves. So that's all good. Other things that are happening. Visual Studio is introducing what they call planning. Now, you might have seen this. I've seen this in Visual Studio Code, and you see it in things like Claude Code and stuff like that as well. If you ask it to do something, if you ask an agent or AI assisted coding engine like Copilot or like I say like Claude Code, it will often create a plan first. and creating a plan helps it understand what to do, not make mistakes, and all the rest of it. I think the Visual Studio team are kind of formalizing that process a little bit in Visual Studio, and certainly bringing more visibility to it. But the plans are going to live in Markdown files, temporary Markdown files, which actually is interesting because it means that you can pick them up and reuse them, or tweak them and change them and put them back in again if you really want to. So I think that's quite interesting. So Copilot will decide whether or not it needs to do a plan based on how complicated the task you're asking it to do is. There's a location where you can go and see the plans once they're made, which is interesting. I don't know if there's a way of sort of saying, I guess you could just take and copy and paste the plans, but it does say you can to reuse a plan, you should add it to your repo, take it out of that temporary place, basically. You can, interestingly, you can like stop the response, you can update the file with your own information and then restart it. And I think that's quite powerful. If you want to review the plan or add context to the plan, or catch the nuances, that's definitely a thing I've found with AI generated code. It's great, it's really, really powerful, but sometimes it misses some important nuance that isn't written down anywhere. So it's not like it's fault, it's just the way it is. So you find yourself sort of following up to be like, oh yeah, that's great, but can you actually do it like this? Can you do it like this? Can you do it like this? I think catching that at the planning stage is valuable. It will save time, save rework, less bugs, all the rest of it. So I think that's cool. Really interesting. So that's worth a read through, especially if you use Visual Studio. This is like the big fat Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. And then finally, this is kind of like a tangent, but I thought it might be interesting if you're using the Workflows app. Workflows app is going to get AI capabilities. Kind of quite surprised it hasn't got it already. But towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, there's going to be this kind of a new feature, AI workflows in the Microsoft Teams workflow app. So weirdly, I actually think this might be the thing that makes workflow actually quite useful. And it's probably the bit it's been missing when it first came out. I think we're all struggling a little bit to understand what it was for, what it did. Maybe not everyone, I was. But so I think this is interesting. Giving it the Copilot capabilities as well, I think will make it much easier to create tasks just through asking for what you want. And so I think that'll be interesting. It's going to ship with some predefined templates as well, of course it is. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is interesting. You need a Copilot license to use it. There's a whole bunch of things for admins about how you can turn it off or control it. But if you use the Workflows app today, then definitely you'll probably notice this as it comes. If not, it might be a good time to go look at it again, just see if there's anything in there that is of use to you. I know it is confusing times at the moment with everything seemingly everywhere, and like here's one more tool that can do similar things to lots of the other tools. I think we'll see that hopefully sort itself out over the next kind of 12 months. It's hard because the technology is still evolving, and it really feels like Microsoft is struggling just to kind of stay not relevant is the wrong word, but like the pace of change in the AI space. I mean, just look at like in the last week we've had Claude Skills, which I haven't even touched on. That's a whole thing that you've got to imagine like the Copilot folk are looking at that and saying, okay, if this really hits some tipping point, we should do this too, like they did with MCP and the other things that have come out of Anthropic. So interesting times for sure. Really interesting, and I'll keep trying to keep on top of all the stuff that's going on as it pertains to sort of the Microsoft 365 world and Copilot extensibility and all that sort of stuff. Hope that's been useful. Have a great week, whatever it is you're doing, and I'll speak to you all next time.